Yeah. Yeah, every year it sells more than the year before, which on one hand is great. It really is. The fact that it continue, like I continue to run into people, like I met someone the other day in Bryson City, North Carolina, and she said, I carry 5 copies with me at all times so that she can just give them out. I mean, people do that with this book. It's fantastic. But Paula, I'll tell you, I can't wait for the day when my publisher says, hey, nobody's buying this anymore. We're going to stop printing it, right? Like, I can't wait for this to be obsolete. I can't wait for this to not be needed anymore. But in the meantime, yeah, it is still...
Well, I remember saying to you at the time when you were doing your tour, I said, is this a book for the market moving forward or the market looking back? And your answer was, oh, it just makes me so unhappy, but that's the market going forward for a few more years.
Yeah,
and yeah, it's painfully true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm honored to do my part. Honestly, it's. I haven't yet found the right words, and as a author/speaker, that's a little embarrassing. But I haven't yet found the words to really articulate what it's like to know that, because I know who I am, and I know I'm not that impressive. I know there's nothing really all that remarkable about me. I've got issues. And to think that like something that I have just offered has made the impact that it has, it's humbling, it's grace, and honestly, it just every time I hear someone talk about how meaningful it has been to them, I'm just reminded of to get to be a conduit of love in this way for me is just the greatest gift. It's the greatest gift for me. So when I talk about staying open like I did earlier, like I mean it. Like that's literally how I live my life, to just stay open. As much as I can be a conduit for love, I'm going to keep showing up, because what better purpose is there in life? I don't know.
When did you start thinking about the shift?
I started thinking about the shift when it was about 4 years into our church. So we started our church in 2014. After about 4 years of doing really concentrated work of guiding and shepherding people through their shift is when I began to notice all these commonalities, these shared experiences. Yes, everyone's story is unique to them, but also kind of not really. It's kind of like we all end up hitting these moments of, whoa, the framework and the ideas and the language that I had for God doesn't work for me anymore. Now what? Or the church, like I can't stand it, but also I really want to go, but I'll never go again. But also, what time does service start? You know, it's like this push, pull, love, hate. And I noticed all these threads after doing this work for 4 or 5 years, and I thought, I wonder if there's a way to put that down in such a manner as to be somewhat helpful. Because look, you're not going to be immune. Like here's what's not going to happen. There's not going to be someone who begins their shift right away, reads a book like The Shift, and then manages to go all the way through their journey of transformation unscathed, right? That's not actually a real thing. So framing it as like a survival guide is kind of helpful, but really there's no way to go. It's like the book I used to love reading to my kids when they were little. We're going on a bear hunt. You know this book? You know, we're going on a bear hunt. We're going to catch a big one. What a beautiful day. We're not scared. And then they run into these obstacles like, oh no, grass, big wavy grass, which I'll be honest with you, why is grass an obstacle? Doesn't matter. The refrain of the book is, we can't go over it. We can't go under it. Oh no, we have to go through it. And I really think people have to go through all of the obstacles of the shift. But if they can have a companion that normalizes that experience, that says, you know what, it's not hard because you're doing it wrong, it's just hard because it's hard. And here's a few things that you might keep in mind as you go along the way. That's when I began to think this might be a helpful resource for people on this journey.
So what's the next one? Is there a trajectory here? I possibly see one.
The next one, I will give you a bit of a sneak peek of it. The next one is about the topic of sin. Aren't you excited? So one of my favorite sermon series that I did at our church, and the one that honestly people still talk about today, like they've forgotten most of them, but they remember this sermon series, and it was about the topic of sin. And it was discovering this forgotten tradition behind the word hamartia, which is the Greek word that is most often translated as sin in the New Testament. And so I explore the concept of hamartia. I reimagine a way of thinking about sin that gets us out of what is this extreme dichotomy where, y'all know how like in the conservative world, sin is everything? Yeah. Like sin, honestly, is more powerful than God. They won't say it, but it's true, because what's more powerful, the thing or the thing that keeps the thing from being with the other thing, right? You know, like you say God's all powerful, but you actually think sin has somehow ability to like keep us distant from God. So anyway, sin is all powerful in the conservative world. And then over in and I wonder if Envision ever experiences this, over in some of the more progressive ends of the spectrum, nobody talks about it. It's like taboo. And it makes sense because it's triggering and activating, but also we don't really know how to talk about that word.
That would be true of most mainline Protestant churches in America.
They
refuse to talk about it.
Yeah. So anyway, I've got this, what I think is going to be my best book yet. I had a proposal together at the end of last year, and my agent started shipping it to publishers, and had a few meetings that went well, but ultimately one publisher said, I think you're holding back. And as soon as he said that, I realized he was right. Because last fall, and some of you might know this, last fall, my almost 19-year marriage ended in the same month that we closed our church. And so my whole world kind of fell apart in August of last year. And then I went into writing a proposal for a book. So the whole proposal was just from here up. It was really great, but it was all head. And it was these publishers that were like, there's this missing. I'm like, you're right. Let me get back to you. So I said to my agent, pull the proposal. Let me sort of recalibrate my life. I'll redo it with some heart, and then we'll really cook with gasoline.
So which company said that to you?
I'm going to keep that nameless.
Okay. I have a feeling I might even know who that was. Yeah, when you get ready to do that one, James Hollis, Swamplands of the Soul.
Okay. All right.
He handles, he's a Jungian analyst. Jungians are not afraid of talking about sin, by the way, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
So what questions do you have for Colby? Just put your hand up, you'll ask the questions. I will repeat the question because our folks watching online will not hear you ask the questions. So questions, what questions do you have for Colby?
And I was thinking this could be, if you read the book, if something came up for you out of the book that you want to discuss or talk about, or even just anything that was shared tonight, or, I mean, good gravy. If you read Unclobber and you're like, I really have something about that I want to
I see you ready to go, Toby.
So chapter 7, I can't stand church, where can I find it? 7 tips for trying church again. That would have been so helpful in Unclobber. When I read that book,
Yeah.
this book changed my life. And I came back to church by coming to this church after I read this book. And it really changed my life. So I would like to have seen those 7 tips.
So what Toby was saying was that Unclobber, like so many of us, was just life-changing. It was profound, and that they wish that also in that book that it had included the chapter from The Shift on, what's the title of it? That chapter's title?
The chapter title is I Can't Stand Church, Where Can I Find One?
Yeah, I Can't Stand Church Where to End. Yeah, the 7 steps in doing that. So, you know, when Unclobber goes back to, is that a WJK book?
Yeah.
So will they reprint, do you think?
Well, it's in its second print right now. So the second edition came out a couple months ago. It's got an extra chapter for me. It's got study guide at the end.
Could you pull it back and maybe just put that in?
Yeah, do that. So here's the thing. And what was your name?
Toby.
Toby? Here's the thing, Toby, is I couldn't have written that because I needed the years specifically of pastoring and leading our church Sojourn. I needed all that experience. I needed to meet people and have those observations and be able to really process what that experience was like for people to walk through the door. So back in 2015 when I wrote Unclobber, we'd only been doing Sojourn for about a year and a half at that point, and I just didn't have the language or the capacity. So that's one of the things where I learned it as I went, and then I was like, oh, I think this is how I can talk about church now.
So Toby has been the leader of one of the most effective PFLAG chapters in the nation. Boulder County also is one of the leading spokespeople in this area on issues related to, well, all things LGBTQ+. And a valuable voice that we appreciate. So yeah, so when you've moved Toby, that's something. So yeah, Nicole. How to pull a progressive Christian community together in a place like Alabama, where liberals are in an extreme minority.
I'm going to respond to that question with an observation, D, and then I'll see if an answer emerges out of that. But here's the response. So I've been traveling for the last several months to talk about this book, and I have had a profound realization as it relates to these churches like this, progressive Christian type churches. I have discovered that it seems to me, and this is purely anecdotal, but it seems to me that it is easier, I use that word carefully, it is easier to build progressive Christian churches in more conservative spaces, i.e. the South or other conservative parts of the country, than it is in more progressive liberal spaces. Because this is what I've been seeing churches that are on some levels thriving in parts of the country that I'm like, this doesn't make sense. And then in other parts where you would think it would make sense, there's a real struggle. And lots of my colleagues in the last couple of years have had to close their churches because of it, and myself included. And one of the observations I've made is I think that in places like Alabama, in the South, in more conservative places, the culture of like going to church and being a part of a church, that's just like in the water. Like that's just part of what you do. That's part of who you are. And so while there might be fewer progressives in conservative areas, the ones that you do get retain that part of them that is committed to church. And so it's a little bit easier to then coalesce and bring together them. Whereas when you go to the more liberal, and I'm doing this because like the coastal elites, even though I know I'm in Colorado, which is like, what am I, like, wax on, wax off? What's happening here? There are, yes, theoretically, there are more progressives by which you could draw from, but in these areas, there is less of that culture of church going. And so it's easier to convince a conservative area progressive person to keep going to church than it is to convince a progressive person in a progressive area to invest in church. So D, I hope that encourages you, if nothing else. But that is an interesting observation I've made. So the second answer is I don't know. I don't know. Like there's no one right way to do it. My suggestion, my advice would be start where you are. Start wherever you are. And if that's just you and a friend, start there. If that's you and two friends, start there. And don't get carried away with, we need this, we need that. Just whatever you have, let it be enough. And just begin to chase after whatever you feel Spirit inside of you, inviting you to be and do in your life. Find the people in your life that want to do that with you and just start right there. And then see what happens from there. Let that be the thing that sort of bubbles up an idea of what you might do in that part of the country.
So Eva. So each question is about having prayed as with God as other and no longer feeling that way about it. Talk a little bit about that as it's in the book. As other out there, God as not being other out there. Capital O.
This has been true for my shift and true for many, not all, but for many. Where I'll just speak for me, where I hit these points where certain beliefs of mine about how the world works, how prayer works, how God seems to relate to the universe, stopped making sense anymore in light of actual lived experience. And one of the side effects was this loss of the idea of a God who is out there, up there, who somehow occasionally interacts with the world. You know, if you say the right things or believe the right things, like every once in a while you can convince this divine being to do something for you. And I hit this point where I'm like, that can't be how this thing works anymore. And I went through this period where I lost this connection with the personal God. Because the plus side of that is you have a very personal relationship with God. And you pray to God as our Father who art in heaven, or our mother, and you have this like real personal connection, and it's precious, and it's valuable, and it's meaningful. And then I hit this point where it didn't make sense anymore, and I began to lose this idea of God as a being and God as a personal being. And I talked about in the book how I would sort of latch onto these other ideas of God as source, God as the ground of our being, God as event, this sort of inviter of movement. And for a while, that was a sort of comfortable landing place for me as a way to think about the divine. Where I'm getting at is I find myself moving into a different period of life, and this is, as often happens, the things that move us in life are great love and great suffering, and I've gone through a period of great suffering over the last year. And what I've found is I have returned, or I have once again longed for and connected with some sort of personal God. And I don't have anything to say other than that. Like, I don't know how it all makes sense, but I found I have needed in some nights to just be like, all right, God, I got nothing. And she's right there. Yeah.
Other question? Yeah.
That actually kind of branches off what you said. So I was raised fundamentalist, but because of how traumatic that upbringing was, I briefly, for most of my teenage years, was atheist, because I just wanted to reject the whole concept, because I couldn't fathom the whole, because like with conservative representation, it's like a little cartoon drawing of like, you know what I mean? You know exactly
Yep.
what I mean, right? How do you separate that like conservative, almost cartoonish version of belief from like our type of belief, like progressive, or I mean, it's not one universal thing, of course, but like how do you separate, like how did you learn to be more progressive with the belief, is what I'm saying?
So Victor's question is, how do you become more progressive in a belief system when you grew up in that very fundamentalist approach toward the God who's out there?
What was your name? Victor. The first thing that comes to mind is time. And it's a frustrating answer, right? So when you go through any sort of great suffering, people that are well-intentioned, they tell you it will get better, and usually the subtext is, with enough time heals all wounds, is a cliche because it's kind of true. So part of that is time. The more time you give yourself from any particular paradigm, the less hold that has on you. Another thing that I want to say about that is, and this isn't exactly your question, but I'm going to answer a adjacent question that might play a little bit into that. And the adjacent question is, what do I do in those moments where, and I talked a little bit about it tonight, when the old self comes online, or when I think that maybe I'm wrong in my current thinking, and maybe the thing that I was raised with was right, or maybe this old conception, what if that is, what do I do, right? Because I can't get that out of my head. I can't get that out of my heart. And what the vision I try to cast for people on that is this. When we are born, when we are raised, when we grow up in a family system, whatever that might be, and we begin to learn things that are true about the world, There is not multiple buckets in our brain that hold different categories of truth. Meaning, you don't go to school and learn that 2 + 2 = 4, and you don't put that in the mathematical, scientific truth part of my brain, hold on to that, that's immutable, and then go to Sunday school and learn that, God flooded the earth literally and saved 2 of every animal, and then your brain's like, but put that in kind of a metaphorical truth because you never know when you might need to audit that. No, when you're 4 years old, everything is just going into the truth bucket in your brain, okay? So as you grow up, your brain doesn't perceive a difference between how I think about God as a sort of cartoonish character on the Sistine Chapel versus the fact that photosynthesis is real and sunlight energy and all that. All your brain knows, and therefore all your body knows, is that this is true. So then when you begin to hit these points where you do an audit on your beliefs, or you realize that certain beliefs stop working for you, and you want to lay them down, you want to leave them behind, you want to shift into something else, it's going to take time for your brain to be okay with the fact that this thing that it has always held on as true is maybe not true for you anymore. That's just going to take time. I mean, imagine if right now I said, okay, 2 + 2 does not equal 4 anymore, it equals 6. You're not going to really be able to go to sleep tonight and accept that. It would take you years to maybe finally convince yourself, all right, I think 2 + 2. You know what I mean? Part of that is giving our brain and our bodies permission to let it take time for these old beliefs to work their way through, get sort of out of ourselves. And then there will be a day, I predict for you, there will be a day, and you won't even know, it'll come like a thief in the night, where you'll wake up or you'll just be in an afternoon and you'll be like, whoa, I don't believe that anymore, and I don't even recognize the version of me that did. Like, I don't even remember what that was like. It's so far behind me, and you can't even access it anymore. So,
One of the things about Fowler's stages of faith is you can't skip any of them.
you have to go through it.
You
can't
have to go
over
through
it.
them,
Yeah, all the
right?
stages.
And so many people get stuck in 3 or in 4.
Yeah.
And 4 is the permanent skeptic and not really open to the spiritual. We're going to talk a little bit next Sunday, by the way, about experiencing God as resonance, something that resonates.
Neat.
So
I like that.
Sunday.
I'll be here.
So yes, Lonnie. Do you have opportunities to spend time with conservative Christians? And if you do, where do you find the common ground with them?
Not very often. Not very often. I used to have more in the past, or I used to make space for more in the past. And I think I hit a point where the futility of it just became overwhelming. I just felt like, I don't know that I'm doing any good here. I don't know that I'm moving the needle at all. One of the things what's your name again? Lonnie, one of the things I've been able to discern over the years is the difference between when someone shows up to a conversation with genuine curiosity versus when they want to just show up to try to prove a point or make a point or make it. And honestly, like 97% of interactions, people fall in the latter camp, where they're not really asking a question. And if I sniff that out, I have zero time for that, because like the number of people who will accuse me, and this happens online a lot, the number of people who will be like, you don't ever quote Bible verses for the things you say. And I don't respond to them because it doesn't go anywhere. But if I were to respond, it would be like, I've done that before. And you know what happens? You throw a Bible verse back at me. Where does that get us? Nowhere. Like, so this is not how, this sort of conversation doesn't, if I can, though, Lonnie, perceive that there is genuine openness and curiosity there, what I try to do in that space is, first of all, I can't change anyone's mind. We don't change people's mind. Yes, people's minds change. Obviously, look around the room. People's minds change. Yeah, that's real. We don't change other people's minds. And what I mean by that is, when I think back to my own shifts and when I stopped believing X and started believing Y, Sure, I could tell you the books I read, the podcasts I listened to, the people I met, but ultimately what actually flipped that switch, what actually caused me to go from here to there, I don't know. I don't, like, this is just a grace thing to me. Like, I can't explain it. And that helps me know that it's not my job to change other people's mind, because I couldn't even do it if I tried. What it is my job to do, and here's how I'll respond. What it is my job to do is to try and be a person who shows up, whether it's in conversation or just in life in general, with compassion, because I've been where they've been. There's no sense in me like being super judgy about them, because all I'm doing is judging myself, because that was me for most of my life. Or not most at this point. I'm getting older. Compassion and kindness, so that they know that if and when they're ready to legitimately be curious, they know that I'm a safe person to have that conversation with. That's all I want to do for people, is to show them that when you're ready, when you've got that little opening in the heart, because the thing is the mind won't go where the heart's unable, and most people don't have the opening in their heart, so they're not ever going to change your mind. You're wasting time. But once they have that little opening in the heart, they know that, oh, that guy, he has demonstrated compassion and kindness and patience, and I'll have that conversation with someone all day long.
So you're getting older, huh?
Yeah, I just turned 40.
Yeah.
Whew.
Yeah, you are younger than my youngest child. Just saying. You have a unique gift of taking complex information, hermeneutically, exegetically, correctly, bringing it so every last person can understand it. You do not insult the brilliant and well-educated, and you also speak to those who have a great desire to learn but don't have the same levels of education. You cross the spectrum with your work, and we appreciate it. We have run out of time. We want to make sure we have time for you to bring your book up. I think you still have a few left to sell, right?
Yeah, I've got some copies of The Shift and Unclobber if anybody
Okay.
wants to get a copy.
And I like the idea of having copies of Unclobber in your car and just
Right?
passing them out.
Just having them to give out, yeah.
I recommend that one all the time. So yes, I think we'll just put you at this table right up here.
That's great.
And if you want to get a copy, we'll grab the books that you have and bring them up here.
I love it.
And you can have him sign your book. Thank you so much for being with us. It's been our pleasure, and we expect to have you back when your book on sin comes out.
I love it. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, all of you. Thank you.